Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Shop Talk Live. On the panel this afternoon, we have Victor Paterno, President and CEO of 7-Eleven Philippines, Warren Wilmot, CEO of On the Run Australia, Johannes Samnes, CEO of Right Hand Convenience, and Craig Phillipson, Managing Director of Shopworks. And your host this afternoon is Dan Munford, Managing Director of Insight Research. Dan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Nick. Welcome to Shop Talk Live. Welcome back. We've got a terrific audience for you this afternoon. It's a record, 33 countries. So thank you very much for supporting us and tuning in. Welcome, guys. We're going to have a very interesting discussion this afternoon. But before we start, one question which I think probably is in everybody's minds at the moment, including in the audience, is when can I down a beer with my mates in the pub? And we're going to get some breaking news on that from Australia later. But before we get to Down Under, let's start, if you don't mind, with yourself, Johannes, and find out what's going on right now in the Baltics and the Nordic countries. You're in Oslo, Norway, and I think you've got a pretty good handle on what's going on there. So if we could ask you for an update on those markets to begin with today.
Dear all, thank you very much, Dan, and great to see you all. And I, of course, hope you are all well. Right Hand Convenience, we have about 2,100 stores in 7 countries. And among these 2,100, we have about 180 gas stations, mainly in Denmark and Norway, but also some in Latvia. I think you all know about the Nordics. It's actually the Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Norway. That's the Nordic country we call them. And then we have the 3 Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And of course, we were also hit by Corona-19 about mid-March. So it's now approximately 2 months ago. And of course, it's quite obvious in the beginning, and that's in a way 2 months ago. So we started with the hygiene focus, and we still have that focus, of course, with clean stores and so on. And then I hope the rest of you also join me in thanking our heroes out there. I think that's fantastic to see what they have achieved, and we are so happy to see all the customers coming in still, and all the appreciations we get from the customers. And of course, also the support offices in over 7 countries. It's been a tough 2 months. And I can tell you about figures. It's been between -5 and up to -90. And if I'm going to the 90%, that's of course a very tough one, and that's in airports. And then we can go down to the railway stations and to the metro stations. It's also a quite dramatic drop in sales, and it's obvious why, because the public transportation, it's limited, and also a lot of use of home offices in all over 7 countries. We have the best locations, but unfortunately, people are not allowed to be there, too many of them at least. So that's the main thing. What we have seen now, it's more stabilizing. Gas stations is actually in a plus, and many other stores also in rural areas, in fact, because of, I think that's also something positive. What we also see is that actually in some of the Baltic countries, we have kiosks, and then you know that you can stand outside, and that's been fantastic in a way, but we have seen that they have increased their sales. And of course also drive-through, just to mention some of them. So it's loosening up, meaning the restrictions from the government, not exactly the same in all 7 countries, but now it's possible also, not only in with you, Warren, to go to a pub. It's also possible in Norway and still in Sweden. So I think that's the executive summary. So now we are better off, of course, still except the airports. But thank you so far.
Thanks, Johannes. So interesting, different picture, and we can come back to ask quite a few questions about that later, I'm sure. But Warren, tell us how it is that you're in Victoria, right? So the pubs aren't open yet.
Oh, it's state by state here. I work in South Australia. I live about 22 steps from the local pub. Unfortunately, it's not open. The other problem is I haven't got any mates to go and drink with either, so I'm sort of doubly damned, really. The South Australia at the moment is absolutely coronavirus free. There was one case in the last 22 days, and it was someone from the UK. Thank you very much. He's now better. Western Australia is now coronavirus free. Victoria's got a couple of hot spots, but for us, that's sort of about an extra, 4 or 5 a day. I think in Australia there was 14 cases, new cases today in all of Australia, and the deaths have been under 100. So it's been well contained. All the social distancing, closing down borders between the states. So I've got to get special permission to fly to work each week. It sort of seems to have worked very well. So just slowly they're releasing the lockdown restrictions. A lot of cafes and restaurants are starting to reopen if they can have less than 10 people in there. I think within a fortnight, that'll sort of move up to about 20, 30 or 40. So bit by bit, I think in South Australia, 90% of the kids are back at school. That's brought a lot of the trade back. And in fact, overall in the business, I did some work since we talked yesterday. We're about 5 or 6% up in sales on this time last year. So we're actually well ahead of last year in just about all of our brands. We've got 5 quick service restaurant brands. We've got the Krispy Kreme brand in South Australia, as well as our convenience stores. About the only thing that's still lagging is petrol or gas. It probably dropped to about 50% of last year's volume. Now it's probably about 20% behind last year's volume as school's gone back and a lot of the offices are starting to operate full time. So it's a fairly good picture here compared with what we're sort of hearing from around the world.
So a pretty strong bounce back, basically, Warren, to old habits.
It's absolutely surprised us. I think that we were sort of planning for long term. I think we stood down about 1,000 employees across all of our outlets. We're starting to have to put a lot of those back on now. Big move towards drive-through. We've got drive-through windows in a lot of stores. We've got tunnel drive-through stores. So a lot of pre-ordering on the app and then picking up in store. But everyone seems fairly relaxed about it. I thought things like cash would disappear out of the system, and I think before this we're at about 37% of our sales were in cash. At the end of this, we're at about 31% of our sales in cash, so not much change there. I offered face masks to all of our staff. I haven't seen a single one wearing them at all, so even the staff have felt somewhat relaxed about the situation, which is a great situation to be in.
Well, it's great. It's so good to hear such good news from Australia. So, delighted for you. But I suppose in a way, Australia's experience hasn't been as tough as some other countries. And Victor, I don't know whether you want to tell us about the Philippines and your experience there. I mean, obviously in the UK, we'll be hearing from Craig in a minute. It's been pretty tough.
So yeah, by what I've read and by Google's own mobility figures, which have been published, at least for Asia, the Philippines has the most onerous lockdown in the world after Wuhan. Maybe arguably on par with India's. People are allowed, each household is issued a quarantine pass with the name of the bearer and the picture. And that pass holder is allowed to go out to shop for essentials. And nobody else from that household is allowed to go out. That person is usually the housewife, who is usually not the core CVS customer. So as a result, our customer counts have dropped by a third. Sorry, 2/3, right? Republic, so I can't tell you our PSD sales figures, but average transaction has made up for it, but as you can imagine, not enough, right? So when this crisis, when I first started seeing the numbers, the first thing I did was draw down my credit lines, even if I didn't need them, because you never know when the banking system is going to freeze up, right? And then after that was negotiate for more. Because you know, in a crisis, first you want to make sure you'll survive. Second is you want to be able to deploy that cash strategically. So you want to pay your suppliers on time so that you are first in line for merchandise. The fill rate dropped. The Philippines never had a good fill rate to begin with, but the fill rate dropped from about 80% to 30%, because, especially on essentials, because the factories were empty, right? And you know, there was the usual panic buying that you saw in other countries. We plan to deploy that cash hoard strategically going forward by, you know, loaning money to franchisees. Yeah, so things are getting better, but I envy the Western countries. Obviously, you have more organized governments, but the other thing, which is counterintuitive, is you have populations that can't wait to leave lockdown. In the Philippines, there's this irrational fear, and so you can look it up. I have 2 public Facebook posts that got quite a bit of traction, one on LinkedIn also. We're still in lockdown. And it's been extended. You know, it was supposed to be 1 month. It got extended another 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks after that. So it's been 2 months. And we're going to a modified lockdown. But by the government's own published reports and by their own criteria, right? Their criteria, it's a wise criteria. It's not number of cases, but the rate of increase in the number of cases. So they call it case doubling time, right? When we locked down, case doubling time was at 4. Cases would double every 4 days, so we locked down right in time, right? But now for Metro Manila, case doubling time is every 37 days. Their own guidelines say you don't need a lockdown after 30. And yet, you know, of course, they don't publish that actual data. They publish the case count, and nobody bothers to compute what the case doubling time is, but it's a very trivial thing to do. So I did, and I published it, and anyway. So yeah, we could use some credible expertise from the West, I think.
Craig, tell us about thanks, Victor. It's a difficult situation. I mean, tell us what it's like in the UK, Craig, from your perspective.
Well, we've been in lockdown for just over 6 weeks, and you know, I think we're starting to see a way out of it, hopefully. You know, just at the moment, so they've moved from essential retail. Added this week, they've added garden centres and DIY sheds, so we can all do up the house and the garden. So that's a little ray of sunshine. You know, 150 Starbucks are opening today. Interesting to your point, Warren, they will be no cash. And we've seen a big reduction in the use of cash. They'll have reduced menu and will be mainly drive-through. There's talk, although it's unconfirmed by IKEA, but there's talk that IKEA will open on the 18th. As we talked about earlier, Dunelm are planning to open 7 of their stores, but only for browsing, which is a really interesting move in terms of shopping. And then June the 1st, it's other non-essential retail can open with government guidelines. And, you know, interestingly, those government guidelines mirror what convenience retail has been doing for the last 6 weeks. So, you know, it's all about social distancing, one-way flow, queue outside if you have to, minimum contact, contactless if you can, segregation between customers. And, you know, if we all continue to socially distance and keep the spread rate down, which was, I think today was 3.5, or yesterday was 3,500 new cases. But the fear is driven by the fact that we've had 33,000 deaths. So, you know, people are, I think, understandably nervous.
Yeah, completely. And that compares, Victor, you just put a question around the panelists, which I'll just put to Craig. Was that, so that was no cash in those Starbucks that are opening, Craig, was that right?
Yeah. It'll be all contactless payment.
Just
Pardon?
only for Starbucks.
Yeah, just for Starbucks. That's not a nationwide mandate.
Okay.
But it is a reflection of how retailers are moving. And then in terms of having a beer, we're going to have to wait until at least July the 1st, which is pubs, restaurants, and other entertainment.
There's going to be some dry throats out there, that's for sure.
Oh, the shocker.
What about new consumer behaviours, guys? Let's just move to the next question, because we've got a really good picture of where your markets are now. But what about the new consumer behaviours? Who'd like to go? Johannes, would you like to talk about what you think the new normal will look like?
Yeah, thank you. And new normal, I don't think that will last for very long. So I think it will be a lot of changes in the future. So I think the new normal, I put that aside, but I think what's very important that customers, they need to feel safe. So what we can see increasing, it's click and collect, it's obvious, and it's deliver, click and deliver. We also have the packaging issue that before we had the bakery nicely, of course, open, but now we have it, of course, packed. It's some obvious things that happen, but what we also see is actually that ready to heat, ready to eat, fresh to go, hot to go. I think we see that increasing in some locations because people are eating from home. And that's also quite obvious because more home office use still also in over 7 countries. So I think you mentioned the contactless payment and use on the card. I think in our part of the world, except the Baltics, we have more or less contactless payment. And also they increased up to 50 euro or approximately $50 that you can do the contactless, because then you don't have to touch the pad, as we all know. I can also be very proud because we actually opened the first unmanned store in Sweden, 26th of May. So, and then you just scan your phone, walking in, pick what you want, walk out again. Contactless. So we're looking forward to that. That's open from the public and we will roll that out in Scandinavia and further, I think. So that was some input from us regarding this.
Yeah, and Warren, you're not. I mean, let's just contrast to what you're expecting. We had a chat about this in our call yesterday. In Australia, you don't expect that much change, do you?
No, I was looking for lots of trends and lots of things that might happen. If I go back to the cash, I actually opened a cashless store just before Christmas. I gave it a try. I thought I could do something in the middle of Adelaide that would be a bit more safe and secure. We put the cigarettes into a dispensing unit and I thought we could have a very open store. We saw a lot of customer resistance to not being able to take cash, so we finally gave in. I think the first week of lockdown was the week that cash went in there. I think we sort of said to our staff, a few people said to me, you should get rid of cash. I said, customers are still paying for it. If the staff want to use sanitizer before and after they actually handle cash, that would be fine. And that sort of seems to have been what's happened, and certainly no customer resistance. I think that just watching things even in the UK of people crowding onto the tube, watching them on public transport in Australia, I do think that creatures of habit are going to want to go back to what they had before. Now, we haven't been as affected, we haven't had the death rate or anything like that, so perhaps it might be a bit of an Australia-New Zealand thing that people will very quickly fall back to their previous habits and what they've done. I'm not expecting there will be much change in these countries in what people are after.
No. And Victor, going to the Philippines, which obviously is having a tough experience with this, just like the UK is, for instance. But are you expecting changes, some big changes in consumer behaviour in your store?
Yeah. I think that again, going back to the fear and riffing off Craig's numbers on the UK deaths, 33,000. We've had 774, right? And our population, we're 100 million. UK's 50 or 60, right? Yeah. But it's a cultural thing. It's just everybody's afraid of death or afraid of getting, afraid of causing a death, even if they don't die themselves. And a lot of people live with extended families. So there's that irrational fear, and that fear is going to drive behavior going forward. I think it will continue to drive behavior until a vaccine is found. What is that behavior? It's going to be home delivery. It's going to be super, super key. There is a very convenience stores are not, I've always said this, we're not well placed for home delivery. We don't have a lot of SKUs. We're not cheap, and we have pretty expensive real estate, right? But we are launching, we are, however, perfectly positioned for pickup points for grocery. Grocery is the most logistically challenging category of all e-commerce. Amazon has backed off, right? Pickup in convenience store provides the greatest logistical efficiencies to e-commerce. Ergo, it makes sense to do grocery pickup in convenience store. Of course, there's also that, okay, convenience store groceries kind of make sense. Convenience stores also, most of us, at least in Asia, run our own DCs. We know how to do unit pick. So we're launching June 1, soft launch. And I think online grocery penetration in the Philippines was probably 0.5%. Latent demand, my estimate, upwards of 50% now. There's just not enough capacity. And the unit economics for convenience store pickup make tremendous sense. I've run the numbers. And it's the only bright spot for us in all of this, actually. So we're going full steam ahead on it.
Well, so a contrasting response. Let's think about the store itself, because obviously delivery is we can see that as growing and growing in many markets. But what about thinking about the store itself in terms of how that perhaps needs to change? Because obviously there's been an immediate change in terms of queue distancing, with queuing going outside the door and so on, screens, all the immediate things have been done very efficiently, incredibly efficiently, by retailers all around the world. But Craig, what are the sort of big strategic clues to how the store itself will change in terms of how it's laid out and run and so on?
Well, to reference back to the previous point, which I think is actually probably driven by fear as much as anything else. So fear, and into that plays age. So the younger you are, the less fearful you are that you're going to catch anything. And I think what we've seen is, for supermarkets and convenience stores, 3 levels of strategy. The first is, as Warren quite rightly said, it's about reassurance. So one-way traffic, 2-meter queuing, get people in, get people out safely. I think certainly in the UK, Morrison's, one of our supermarket chains, has broken cover now and has gone for mission-based queuing. So if you're on a long shop, you're in one queue. If you're on a short shop, you're on another queue. So you kind of cut the line and get through it quicker. And I think inevitably that will be the next stage. And then the third stage, I'm guessing, will be the development of new formats that will play to greater efficiency, bigger curbside pickup, one-way traffic through the store, more like Tiger of Copenhagen or IKEA in certain ways, so that people can move traffic faster through and more efficiently, which in turn, will be superseded by online and so forth.
That makes a lot of sense. So speedy queuing, just like speedy boarding, if you look at the airports, similar sort of positioning there.
Yeah, I think so. So food for now, food for this week, food for this month, and all happening in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about technology, and we haven't really talked about frictionless much, but obviously we had a bit of a mention of less cash. Starbucks UK, no cash allowed at the moment, but looking at technology, isn't this the great acceleration, Victor? I mean, you're very geared up. One of the leaders, I think, in this area in terms of developing technology in your business. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think this is a godsend to tech companies. I mean, as they've said, right? In 2 months, we've accelerated by at least 2 years. So acquisition, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, us guys selling FMCG, grocery stuff will be fine for a while. The supermarkets are killing it, but their big threat, online grocery, right? Because Instacart model is not efficient. It's too expensive. I think technology-wise, we're the wallet guys are going to kill it, right? So we take in like 70% of wallet cash-ins. Most banks don't connect to the wallet, so people have to digitize their cash at our stores. So we saw a surge in that. And it was helped by 90% of the bank branches closing, right? So everybody had to digitize. I mean, that alone. So this is really going to drive it. What will happen to offline retail? It's not very, the future does not look bright, right? I think convenience will be fine. Supermarkets will be doing great now, but the future for that, because of digitization, will be questionable. Yeah.
So, but the other bright spot, you mentioned delivery is one bright spot, but the other bright spot, I guess, for your business is how much you put into technology over the last few years anyway,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Just one question that's come in, and please, in the audience, start sending your more questions through. And I'll just start bringing them in to ask the panel as we go now. So one question that's come in is around government mandated social distancing. Is it feasible in a C-store operation, to follow the mandated social distancing and still run a profitable operation? And I'm thinking about cramped food preparation areas, that kind of thing, or I guess that's what the questioner is considering. Anyone like to take that question?
I'll take it.
Yeah, thanks, Victor.
With us now, it's not a problem, right? With customer count 2/3 down, yeah, not an issue. As for the food service part, food service is 50% of what it was, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. And besides, you have to presume that the clerks are. You don't have to worry about the clerks social distancing so much because they're preparing food, and yeah. So yeah, I don't see it being a problem for C-stores as much as it might be for supermarkets and other higher traffic areas.
Yes.
I think it's quite, we can see it because it's loosening up, as I said, in the Nordic countries and also the Baltics. And we can see that people are, in a way, following the rules, meaning 1 meter in most of the countries between them. And I think it's possible. And as one mentioned already, is that you have one queue going in and out the other way. So that's, in a way, convenient still, but yes, we will see. But I think people are quite following the rules as we can see.
And also, I think that certainly what we've seen here, Johannes, is and obviously the British are predisposed to love queuing, so we have a natural cultural advantage. But you know, we've seen a lot of short-term compliance, and I think that'll go on. And I think people certainly, as people come out of lockdown, and I think people will come out at different rates depending on their age and their vulnerability. You know, people are going to be looking for guidance, you know, and they're seeing it from the convenience retailers, they're seeing it from the supermarkets. And what's interesting for us is that the pubs and the cinemas are saying to us, look, Craig, you work in convenience retail. What are those guys doing that we can learn, so that when we open, we can get it right as well? So, you know, it's nice to see that convenience retail is leading the world in how to get everybody back to work, and how, you know, all of these other great businesses need to open as well. And it's nice to see that the initiatives that are being taken in this area are being really closely looked at by everybody else.
It seems to me it's so valuable to us as a sector to have been allowed to continue trading through this and adapting, isn't it? I mean, it's just very difficult for those businesses, Craig, isn't it, that you that haven't had that experience, you know, to snap back into life.
Yeah,
You know?
and it's discretionary spend, so they're just really worried.
Mm-hmm. Another question come in, and Johannes, I think this is one for you, which is Sweden's. Obviously, a lot of people are interested in Sweden, and you know what's happened, and you talked about that a bit, but. At the start, but you know, is Sweden has Sweden got back to normal faster than other markets that you operate in?
No, and I think the reason from Sweden, because they don't have that kind of restrictions that we have in Norway, for example, and we are neighbors, as you know, but Swedish people, they are following. Not rules, because they don't get any rules, but they get the government's recommendations, and they are loyal and follow them. So actually we can see the same drop in traffic in the metro stations and the airport in Sweden as well, because of the people are following the recommendations and not rules. So that's but I think we are in the same stage as we are in the other countries around Sweden. It's a lot about, it's been many opinions, of course, about the Swedish approach, but I don't want to dig into that, but I think also we have to look behind the figures as well. One more thing I want to mention, and what about the rest of you? I think what I have seen is the goodbye to globalization, meaning and I think it's a lot of possibilities, and a little bit that you can see the national products. I had the board meetings for Denmark with Jesper yesterday, and they have now starting to, in a way, marketing the Danish brand, the Danish products. You have local products. If we move further down, they have close to home. So neighborhood stores, so they want to take care of their stores close to them. That's what we have seen very clearly now, and I think that's also, and I don't want to forget the sustainability that we still has to be very, I'm very clear on that we focus still on the sustainability, and that's a very important issue for all of our countries. Because it's about quality, healthy, and sustainability.
Just staying on that, Johannes, do you think that's got stronger as a consumer concern, or weaker because of this experience?
I think it's stronger because if you look at in general, the customers in our part of the world, they seems to buy more sustainability or sustainable products that last longer. you don't have to talk about the hot dog then, but in general. And maybe you can fix it, you can repair it later on because it's a quality product. It could be a nice jacket or whatever, but I think that people want more to buy something they will last for longer and not stay in to buy this what you throw away after a week because of very bad quality, but very cheap as well. So instead of that focus, I think it's that will be even more focused sustainability in many aspects.
Well, another question, thank you, Johannes. Another question that's come in, I think, which picks up the globalization point, is from the US, and it's basically a prediction that I've heard before. In fact, Derek Gaskins made it on one of our most recent Shop Talk panels, that because flying is going to reduce a lot, the industry is going to see more long haul road trips, and the US is particularly looking. Some people are predicting this in the US as being quite a big benefit for our sector. Warren, you're nodding. Would you think would apply to Australia too?
Absolutely. I guess Australians are very quick to jump on planes or to visit the world. There's been a huge push already on local travel. South Australia's opened up for the school holidays for local travel as of yesterday. And we see that as a big part. We'll miss, I think, some of the international tourists in a lot of areas. A lot of Chinese tourists on the Gold Coast and in Sydney, that sort of thing. But I think there'll be a lot of staycations and a lot of people doing it locally. Dan, the bit that I probably just wanted to venture into a little bit is, and listening to last week's discussion, there's still so much focus in many countries, quite rightly, on, I think, getting through the lockdown periods and restrictions, COVID. I actually think the bigger issue for all of us over the next couple of years is, when we look back on this, is actually going to be this huge recession or depression that's actually going to come from what's actually happened to the economy. I think that's going to be a bigger economic issue for us than the actual period of lockdown. I think there's going to be a flight to value. I sort of hear Victor talking about delivery. It is more expensive. I wonder if people will actually have the money to play in that space. I think we're in for a very, very tough long haul. While our sales are up at the moment, I'm wondering, as other opportunities for people to go out and do things open up, whether there'll sort of be some of that discretionary money will start to be shared around a little bit. And I think I fear more for the medium to longer term on what the economy is going to do.
Guys, would you agree with what Warren said on that long-term, middle to long-term issue in your economies?
Oh, absolutely. For me, it's gonna be it's gonna be horrible until the vaccine is found. When it's found, depending on how long, it'll be a question of how much we've wrecked our economies until then. It's gonna be bad. Sorry to be the Cassandra.
And I wonder if there's going to be a decline in kind of obvious consumerism and overt consumerism. I can't see that coming back. I think people are going to tighten their belts for quite some time.
Fortunately for us, people will always have to eat, and people will be down trading. You know, when people feel more comfortable eating prepared food, instead of going to restaurants, or they'll go to fast foods, and instead of fast foods, they'll go to convenience stores.
And Victor, are you going to pivot to the essentials, do you think, in your stores to think about that?
Everybody I've spoken to in the 7-Eleven world, at least, is making a huge pivot to essentials. Convenience store, prepared food dropped by half, right? Grocery more than doubled, right? And I've long argued that this is something we were looking at even before all of this. I have this thesis, and you can do the research yourself. The three highest return on equity convenience chains in the world, two are publicly listed: 7-Eleven Japan and 7-Eleven Thailand. The third is listed but part of the parent, OXXO in Mexico. they all follow the same model. It's convenience plus mini mart. So on essentials, their margins are much lower, but they make it up on, you know, chips and snacks and all of that. And the model just works, right? Because if you're going to sell, if you devote more space to more snacks, that doesn't mean, you know, you're going to sell more snacks. But if you have a broader range of groceries, you know, there's a lot more, you know, shampoo and conditioner are different products. Salty chips and vinegar chips are not really that different.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Johannes? Just on the sort of economy point and the sort of essentials opportunity.
I think it's a lot of possibilities in the future, and it's very important to be in a way awake on that. And we our owners, we have a very strong financial situation, so we know that we will, together with our strong franchisees coming through this, also in even stronger after, because it will not be after on a certain date, but it'll be later in a period, and it will take, of course, a lot of time. But I think we are very happy about the franchising now, because they take the responsibility in each store and following up the customers on the local basis. And I think that's more and more important, as I mentioned earlier, regarding these national products, national thinking, local focus, neighborhood stores. Yeah.
I guess, I mean, just drawing together a few threads that we've just discussed, and perhaps you could comment on this, Craig. But I mean, obviously, we're in for some tough economic times once we get out of lockdown, as you said, Victor and Warren, very strongly. And that's sure, you know, it's a long-term picture. But obviously, from looking at our sector compared with other sectors, so pubs, restaurants, cafes, who aren't even open now and aren't even trading now, and you know, are faced with, you know, do you open up if you can only have a certain number of customers into a pub or a club or a restaurant? I mean, what can you do? Isn't that going to, I guess, be something which will help the part of the business that is open, in terms of looking at share of stomach and that kind of thing, Craig? I mean, you know, they've got it a lot harder than we have, haven't they?
Yeah, I think inevitably, what they're trying to analyze at the moment, you know, we're helping a pub chain with 220 pubs, and they're looking at each pub and saying, look, if only 20% of our customers are going to walk in the door on August the 1st, is it worth opening at all? Or, you know, are we better to wait till we estimate 40% of our customers will come back in September or October or November or whenever it is? Because you know, the fixed costs are there. As soon as they start opening, they start increasing their variable costs. They've then got food wastage, beer wastage, and so it goes on. So, you know, their scenario is fairly complex in terms of what they can do. Now, cinemas are slightly easier because they only need 20% occupancy to run anyway. But, you know, pubs and restaurants, much more difficult, which are in the end marginal businesses based on covers. So I think in some respects we're lucky to be in the convenience business.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. So last point, guys, before we finish up 45 minutes in. But are you optimistic about the future? Just a quick sort of one sentence answer from everybody. Warren?
Yes, I think we haven't been as deep or as hardly affected as everyone else. As I say, it's the economy piece that worries me. I think housing prices are going to fall, and a huge amount of unemployment, a lot less discretionary money. That's the bit that worries me.
Victor?
As I've said, I'm very pessimistic about the future, but I'm optimistic about at least being in the convenience store business.
And Craig?
Well, you know, we're ready for the pain, but after that, hopefully the pleasure.
Well, yeah, all looking forward to that. And Johannes, just to finish up, are you optimistic?
Of course, and because we have fantastic franchisees around in the stores, together with their staff and the heroes out there. So, and the fantastic support offices in 7 countries. So yes, I am optimistic. Lot of possibilities. Thank you.
Well, terrific. Well, just before I say goodbye to you guys and thank you, I'm just going to tell everybody that as a bonus, I've got my NACS Europe's colleagues coming back in. So that's Mark Waltman, Christian Warning, and Magnar Mokkelgaard, just to think about some of their takeaways to what you guys have said. So we're going to have another 20 minutes, quick chit chat, just thinking some of the points through that you've made. So if you're watching and you've got time to give us another 15 minutes or so, then please stay on. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Craig, for joining us today. Warren, Johannes, and Victor. And I know it's late there, but and the pubs aren't open yet. But have a drink on us, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Well, so we had a really interesting discussion. Just while we bring in my NACS colleagues, let me just tell you what's coming up in Global C-Store Focus next Friday. We have a webinar on a topic which has come up a few times over the last few weeks, electric vehicles, or more broadly, the future of mobility and electric vehicles, and a very impressive group of people to talk to next Friday, 2 o'clock UK time. So Sophia Nadur from who's the Director of Advanced Mobility at BP, Eric Lorentzen from the very respected Norwegian EV Association, who know everything about EVs, EV growth and development in Norway, and James Carter, who has 26,000 followers on LinkedIn at Vision Mobility, so must be saying interesting things, and I assure you he is. That's next Friday. So looking forward to focusing on that topic, which is a biggie next week. The other thing in Global C-Store Focus to look out for next week is we've done an exclusive interview with Ilyas Munshi at EG Group, Eurogarages. As ever, fascinating insights into how they see the future developing. They're bigger than Facebook in terms of numbers of employees now. They have 50,000 employees worldwide, so a huge business, and it was a great pleasure to speak to Ilyas this week. So we'll be publishing that on Global C-Store Focus this next week. Looking forward to that. Which leaves me to welcome my colleagues who are from NACS on the NACS regional representatives, Mark Waltman, Christian Warning, Magnar Mokkelgaard. Welcome guys, if we can bring you back.
All right, hi Dan.
Hello. Hi, Mark. Hello, Magnar.
Hello, do you hear me?
So Magnar, just while we bring the others on, hi Mark, how are you doing? I hope you noticed this, Mark.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sorry, I'm going with a blank one.
You missed an opportunity.
I have one over there.
Very good. Now we'll come to you in a minute, Mark. But Magnar, you were listening to what Johannes had to say about the Nordic countries and the Baltics. Any surprises? You've worked in the right-hand business a good part of your life. So any surprises from Johannes?
Not really. I'm in contact with Johannes every once in a while still, so no surprises there. But thinking about what people said during the first 45 minutes, I think one of the key things we need to think about is not only what will the new normal be, but when will it be? We're only 6 to 8 weeks into the crisis. Will it take another year before things get kind of normal? Or will it take even longer because of money issues, financial issues? What will the consumer learn during this time? What kind of behavior that is new to the consumer will the consumer keep afterwards? The longer this crisis lasts, I think the more surprises we are in for with regard to future consumer behavior.
I suppose just listening to what Warren has to say, Magna, on that is that, you know, talking to Warren, talking to colleagues in the UK and Ireland, listening to what Victor had to say. I mean, Australia and New Zealand experience has been different, hasn't it, to many other parts of the world. And Warren's worried about the economic impact, but looking at quite a quick rebound, if you like, to you know, existing behaviours in that market. So I suppose we are seeing is a clear differential, isn't there, to you know, to different experiences in different markets.
You know, sometimes I like to quote Joe Thompson, who started 7-Eleven many years ago, who said that convenience is giving the customer what they want, when they want, and where they want it. And I think as this crisis lasts and as the consumer changes, the where, the what's, and the whens may change. Will less people keep on commuting? Will people work more from home? Will the morning peak hour have the same size as it used to have? Will people use their car more to travel around when they cannot go abroad? There are so many things that may happen that really makes us rethink the basics of what we are doing.
Very strong points. Mark, I'll come to you in a minute, but I've just got a comment on Christian's background. That's well played, Christian. Germany's handled it well, hasn't it, Christian? We're all a bit envious in the UK of some of the numbers coming out of Germany around the crisis. But is business getting back to normal in Germany now?
First of all, you can hear me good?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of German angst may help us in terms of locking down early, and yeah, things are again better than in many other parts, and we are going back, but there might be coming back, of course, that big drop back of the recession, which then will also hit us, maybe not as hard as other countries again, but I think people underestimate, even in Germany, that the government cannot flood the money in everybody's pockets. And so there is a kind of, the people like that there will be a back of a new normal, but I see it more like Johannes also said his remarkable quote on, that will be a constant change with everything, and then that will be, I think, also the normality.
How busy are the roads now, Christian, in terms of traffic levels?
It's public transport and train and inner German flights down. Yeah, that's also very hard for of course, convenience retail at traffic hubs. People start back going on cars, but as a federal state republic, each and every federal state has different laws. So I'm not allowed to go to my summer house, which is 1 hour away from Hamburg, because it's a different federal state. That will start on Monday again. So it will come back during the next weeks. First restaurants are open, but as we discussed earlier as well, having just 30% possibilities, and that we don't bring them back into money again.
No. Mark, listening to the discussion, anything sort of really get your attention? We had some interesting stuff came out as ever, but anything particularly grab your attention?
I think two things really here. One is about the consumer. A lot of I think we heard from Johannes, who said there won't be the new normal. It will keep on changing. Magna, you mentioned it's important to look at what the consumer actually is doing and will do in the future. I just went shopping the other day and I thought about myself how normal it has become to go to a supermarket and to queue outside the store, 2-meter distance, and queue there for 20 minutes until you're allowed into the store. And it's not even strange anymore, right? It's the normal thing to do. As consumers, we just accept it and we get used to it. So I think it's really important for us in retail to see what are the good new behaviors that consumers have and what are the bad ones. So if they get used to not visiting certain stores, if these stores are our stores, then we have a problem. If they are used to, as we heard before from some retailers saying that, especially within fuel retail, consumers are suddenly buying categories at petrol stations they never bought before, and it has become the new normal. So there's a big potential as well to get new customers and to just keep them in our stores. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I heard here.
Well, I think you picked up something there, because interestingly, thinking about what Craig had to say about speedy queuing, Morrison's introducing, speedy differentiating between the big shops, if you like, and the convenience or the small shops, the basket shops, and having different queues. And they're obviously maybe thinking about worrying about losing some of those smaller shops because of the queuing to convenience stores that don't have such big queues and maybe can process transactions quicker. So I suppose that makes sense with what your observation, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to play our advantages here. And I think convenience retail has a lot of advantages to play, which brings me to my second thing, actually, and that is about trust. I think trust has always been a big topic with consumers over the past couple of years, fake news, product scandals, all of that. So consumers really like to shop small. They like to shop in the neighborhood with a store operator they know. So that always has been a trend, and I think this is where our strength is once again. And consumers will remember how they have been treated during the crisis. So those stores that treat them well, that offer them the products they need, that make them feel safe and secure, consumers will remember that, and they will return to these stores.
Yes, yes. Magnar, just thinking about one of the topics that Johannes talked about, which was looking at, if you like, the environmental concerns amongst consumers, and he emphasised, didn't he, very much that he felt this was going to be strengthened in a number of ways by this. And obviously, you're based in Norway, know it well. We often spend time in that market with lately, well, before this all happened anyway, with retailers who are looking to get ahead on figuring out what's happening with electric vehicles. But I mean, any outline sort of thoughts on that side of the debate, Magnar, on how fast electrification is going to happen because of all this?
I don't think there is any delay in the governmental targets with regard to electrification. And I cannot see any development in the car market either that says that this crisis will slow down electrification. What it might do is make people buy less cars for a while in general. But somehow when everything gets back to some kind of normal, they will have to start, they will probably start buying cars again, and they will certainly buy electric in this country.
Yeah. Well, that's, I suppose that makes a lot of sense from what I know about how far along Norway has got, but also how governments, I hear, governments are responding to this and the kind of messages that they're putting out. A couple of questions have come in, and perhaps I can put these to you guys. So a question from the Swiss market. Government is limiting visitors per store in Switzerland. So those customers browsing in stores for hours are locking out other customers. Any similar experiences? Any idea how to cope with it? Customers who, I guess they haven't been out of the house for a long time and they just almost want to live in the store for a while. How do you deal with that when there's people waiting outside? Christian, any bright ideas that you've seen?
It's a bit, Northern Germans may have founded social distancing. So we do not have that much problem with having that distance between us. It's more a problem in other parts. So, yeah, people are polite and they have been asked. There is kind of a new retail position which is a greeter, a security safety ambassador at each and every front of the doors, at least at the grocery retailers. And so people are used, and they also do not enjoy so much to spend too much time, of course, in the supermarket. There's a kind of a golden rule: 20 square meter, which is 200 square feet roughly per one customer. And so that's the way they are organizing. And that's maybe one chance that the people go at least a bit more for top up and other stuff, again, to smaller stores where they can see how many people are in and go in and out without queuing such a long time.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So there were queues around the block for Mother's Day in terms of flower stores, so because they are just allowed to have one customer in their stores.
It's a difficult situation. Another question: as people continue to be concerned about food safety, and this very much came up in the discussion, guys, didn't it? What is the future for self-serve salad bars, yogurt bars, dispensed drinks? Magnar, this is a big part of convenience store operations in Scandinavia, isn't it? What's your thoughts?
I think that this is a key question, and it's also linked to what will happen with packaging. I think at least in the short run, we'll see much more preference for prepackaged foods. We see that salad bars are closed, and they should be. And I think we really need to build future trust in our hygiene measures to really get those product groups growing again. And then comes the question, what about plastics? I think we'll see a lot more plastics for a while until we find other solutions that may replace that. But definitely prepackaged items will have a new growth.
Mark, do you see the same progression?
Yes, definitely. We and I agree. We will see the comeback of plastic, as you said, Magnar, temporarily, because I think what we already read all over the news is that when and wherever governments try to restart our economies, actually pumping a lot of money into our economies, that this money should not be spent on the same things as before, but it should be spent on anything that is sustainable, anything that really can not just help the economy, but our society as well. And I think with that, plastic has been a big topic, so plastic will stay being a big topic. And even if it makes a comeback, it will be temporarily, but we will definitely see more packaged goods, whatever that will be packaged in.
Guys, as we bring this to a close, can I ask for one thought from each of you? You know, what are the other big topics that we as a global industry, and you all work in that space, I mean, what are the other topics that we should be considering as an industry? You know, these big questions. Could be something we've already talked about, which you think is particularly important, or something we haven't mentioned. Christian, you know, any really big topics you think we need to grapple with in this new situation that we haven't really talked about?
Yeah, I think Craig mentioned it earlier in terms of new form of development, and I think vending will play a key major role in that. So all the ideas of the technology and food service are like left and right shoe. That would really come together, that would create new formats, touchless, contactless. So technology will help in the acceptance of new vending, unmanned versions of shops, as long as they are safe, secure, and is an interesting customer experience. So don't forget the customer experience aspect at that. Yeah, but I think this is will be kind of a frog leap and acceleration of that. Yeah? So
that's going to be an acceleration.
Things like the salad robot, Sally, instead of having a salad bar, things like that.
Yeah. Magnar, any other big topics that you think we need to be talking about?
You know, you have this topic of friction. The reduction of friction is a key thing for convenience. And I think we need to think about what will the new friction be like? What kind of new friction will the consumer be concerned about? And see what we can do about that, because our industry is obviously one of those that are best placed to reduce customer friction, whatever it is, in a year's time.
It always has been, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Mark, can I leave you with the last comment, just the big topics that we should be focused on?
Sure. I guess with the last comment, that would be the last mile, actually. I think this crisis, well, we have been talking about solving the last mile, owning the last mile, who can do the last mile. And I think this crisis has shown that in many cases, it is not us at the moment who owns the last mile. And there are some companies out there that really excelled in managing this. And we just have to ask ourselves, do we want this part to leave to other companies, or actually do we want to play a more active role in that? And if so, how can we do that?
And Victor had some interesting thoughts on that, didn't he? You know, and
Yeah.
definitely saw that as a big opportunity. It's a
Yeah.
great point. Great points as ever, guys. And thank you for listening to the panel, and coming on straight away afterwards and just giving us some of your thoughts. You know, look forward to taking you out for a beer soon.
Thank you.
I was waiting for this.
I'm not sure how soon. And Johannes, I'm delighted that we managed to keep you for this discussion as well. So look, I'd like to thank you all for taking part, and look forward to seeing you all soon. And thank you to the audience, the amazing 34 countries, for tuning in, and see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Was